She is a woman on a first-name basis with the world. First Lady Hillary Clinton is a political superstar. She has a history of making history, and tonight she's on vacation in Florida, deciding whether to do it again, this time by making a run for the United States Senate in New York. We sat down together a few days ago, and she talked about her future and her recent past. She outlined what she believes in, what she hopes for, and how she's gotten through the hard times in the White House. As she prepares for a life after the White House, a life she now insists will be in New York, Mrs. Clinton is also steeling herself for tough questions from political friends and foes and from the New York media. And here's a tough question, one that you're going to be asked repeatedly, time and again, and you're eventually going to have to answer. For whom do you root, the Mets or Yankees?
That's a very good question. You know, I just love baseball, so the politic answer is that since I do plan to live in New York, no matter what I end up doing, I'll root for both.
But you know, in New York in many ways is split between those who cheer for the Mets and those who cheer for the Yankees. So I have to press you and come back. Mets or Yankees, Mrs. Clinton?
You know, Dan, that's one of those questions that I probably am going to have to give serious thought to give you a final answer.
Hillary Rodham Clinton hasn't answered many questions in the past year and a half. Now, even the easy questions have complicated answers. But then she's pretty complicated herself.
You know, I suppose I could have stayed home and baked cookies and had teas, but what I decided to do was to fulfill my profession, which I entered before my husband was in public life. And I've tried very, very hard to be as careful as possible, and that's all I can tell you.
Once a political lightning rod.
Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Today, she is political lightning, a crowd pleaser and first-class fundraiser, a person under enormous pressure to step into the arena, this time on her own. Let's talk about the New York Senate race. We can't do this interview and not talk about it.
Right.
Now, it's in the papers again now. You've made up your mind to run. It's just a matter of time and an announcement. Is that a fair description of where you are?
No, not really. I'm still thinking about it. People are still talking to me about it. I've been very flattered by the people who've come to me and asked me to consider it, and I'm obviously very interested. It's such a big decision. You know, a year ago, it had never crossed my mind. Even 6 months ago, it wasn't anything that I'd ever thought about. But I'm very committed to, you know, learning about a lot of different issues that I've worked on all my life and how they affect people in New York, because I think that, you know, everything that happens in America happens in New York. And as I've listened to people and talked with them, the kinds of things I care about, education and health care, better jobs, better, you know, balance between work and family, the kinds of issues that I think are going to be on the front burner in the years to come are ones that are of great concern to New Yorkers and of great concern to me.
Why New York? Why not Illinois or Arkansas, where you spend a lot of your time?
Well, you know, I never would have predicted that this event could have occurred, that I would be considering this, but people came to me and asked me to consider it. And of course, I'd been thinking about and talking to Bill about, you know, living there after we finished in the White House. I think that both of us would really enjoy that. So it just all kind of came together, and that's why I'm pursuing it and considering it so seriously.
She talks like a candidate, and she walks like a candidate. And she kisses babies with the best of them. But she remains stubbornly coy about whether she'll run and when she'll decide. You really haven't made the final decision?
No, I haven't.
Have you made a final decision to at least launch an exploratory committee?
No, I've considered that carefully, and that would be the next step that I would take if I go forward.
She has been pushing forward and pushing the envelope since election night 1992, building a reputation here and abroad for her work with women, children, and families. She has gone the extra mile to visit refugees, returned home to push for public schools, and crisscrossed the country to campaign for Democratic candidates and causes.
More than 35 million households across America have guns. And in a third of those homes, the guns are stored loaded and unlocked.
Since the killings at Columbine High School, she has waded into the war over gun control and led the national grieving.
What happened here at Columbine has so deeply affected the rest of our country that we are all Columbine.
On the day we met, those issues were on her mind again. She and the president had spent a long day in Littleton, Colorado, meeting with parents who lost children in the violence at Columbine High. What can you say to them? What do you say to them?
Oh, Dan, it's one of the hardest things Bill and I have to do. And, you know, we've had to do too much of it in the last 6.5 years. You know, today we did a lot of hugging, a lot of saying how sorry we were. We looked at a lot of mementos. And then we talked about what we could learn from this and what we could do to try to make sure it never happened again if that were humanly possible.
Tell me what you talked about.
Well, a lot of them have, you know, been thinking hard about what they could do to give meaning to this. You know, they don't want their children to have died in vain, and neither do we. So some said, well, we hope that parents will just hold their kids tight and spend time with them. And a lot of the parents wanted to go out and speak to other parents about how precious this time with children is. Some were very anxious to talk about the need for better gun laws and then to enforce those laws to make sure that, you know, people didn't get away breaking laws, and whatever new ones we needed should be passed and implemented. Some wanted to talk about the culture and what we could do to try to send stronger signals about how to really turn this culture around, this culture of violence that people have, I think, rightly talked about. So there were so many different ideas, but what was so heartening to both Bill and me is how, in the midst of such an enormous tragedy that, you know, neither of us could even comprehend, these people were looking for hope and meaning. They really want America to not just have the feeling of hurt and sorrow that we all feel, but to do something with that feeling and to really make some of the changes that could make a difference.
Colorado, like many states in the West, Southwest, South, is in some ways a gun culture. I mean, people here grew up with guns. Guns are pervasive. Was there any talk of that?
I think that there was talk about the need for better gun laws and to implement them. But, you know, America's become a gun culture in many respects. We have so many guns. And I was pleased that the Senate did pass some meaningful gun legislation, and I hope that they'll continue to do more, and I hope the House will agree, and that, you know, we will close loopholes, and that we will make a very clear statement that we're not going to permit guns to fall into the hands of disturbed or criminal juveniles or anyone else for that matter.
She says that if she runs for the Senate, it will be because of what she's learned in places like Littleton and in spite of what she's lived through in Washington. Question, Mrs. Clinton, with all that you've been through in politics, you know, virtually under siege for at least the last year and a half, why in the world would you want to go into that kind of campaign, well, particularly in a tough state like New York?
Well, you know, Dan, I just spent the afternoon listening to people who'd suffered an unspeakable tragedy, losing their children in the Columbine High School killings. And they wanted to talk about what we could do together. They wanted to talk about how we could bring people together to solve our problems. They were not filled with bitterness or hatred. They were filled with hope and positive energy. And I respond to that. I'm someone who thinks that, you know, we are so blessed to live in this country. And for me, having an opportunity to serve in the United States Senate, if that's what I were to decide to do, and we're fortunate enough for the people of New York to give me that chance, would enable me to work with people and bring people together and try to solve problems that were on people's minds.
But what's on the minds of many Americans is her marriage and the personal troubles that have been played out so painfully, so publicly.
These allegations are false.
In a year and a half of denials and details and DNA, she has maintained her silence. You know, you never met anybody who wants to respect your privacy more than I do. But you're a very public person. Mm-hmm. And sooner or later, in New York, they're going to say, why are you still with this man?
Oh, you know, we've been together for, I guess, 28 years. We've been married, we'll be married 24 years this year. And we have a deep and abiding commitment to one another. And it is something that has been part of our lives, really almost from the time we met. And you know, I'm old-fashioned enough not to talk about my private life, and I respect your respect for it. But I think that, you know, I look back on all of those years together, and it's just something that means a great deal to both of us.
Given what you've been through the last year and a half or 2 years, did you ever consider leaving him?
I'm not going to talk about that. I respect you, Dan, but I'm not going to answer those questions.
She doesn't bat an eye, and she doesn't give an inch. She has set firm boundaries that she doesn't want broken, and whether she runs for the Senate or not, she is already on a campaign to make Americans define public and private the way she does.
In her historic role to serve our nation and our best ideals.
But in the Clinton White House, public and private, his past and her future are hard to separate. If you were to run, and if you were to be elected, you would walk into a United States Senate, famous or infamous, depending on your point of view, as being a pit of deal-making, compromise, and you'd be walking into a Senate in which a large number of the senators were the same senators who had put your husband on trial and indeed tried to run both of you out of Washington for all intents and purposes.
But you know, it is the United States Senate. It's part of the most important legislative body, I would argue, in the history of the world. And there are a lot of good things, and there are a lot of good people who are working hard together. And you know, after all the years that I've been in Washington, and after all the difficulties and the challenges that you refer to, you know, I still really believe that we are blessed to be Americans and that public service is a privilege. So I'm not at all discouraged or pessimistic about the political process. I just know how tough it is. I know a lot more about that than I did before I got to Washington.
And much of what she learned came during the impeachment of her husband. In a moment, the First Lady speaks personally about that, about how she survived it, and about the messages sent to young people in America by the president's behavior.
Tylenol House Call. Information for healthy living.
Maybe it's the increased stress in our lives or the not-so-healthy food we sometimes eat, but more and more of us seem to be suffering from sensitive stomachs.
It feels like my stomach's churning.
My stomach has a mind of its own.
But what if food or stress isn't the problem? There is a different kind of stomach problem, sometimes caused by a class of pain relievers called NSAIDs that includes aspirin, naproxen sodium, even ibuprofen. These pain relievers, to varying degrees, can sometimes irritate your stomach, and you may not even feel it.
Oh, I'm pretty careful with my stomach.
There is a pain reliever, however, that is not associated with this type of stomach problem. It's the medicine in Tylenol. Doctors recommend Tylenol more than any other pain reliever because nothing is safer to your stomach. So relax, eat healthy, and be smart about the pain reliever you choose. Your stomach will thank you.
Tylenol House Call is brought to you by Extra Strength Tylenol.
Your skin's natural defense against wrinkles, coenzyme Q10, diminishes as you get older. Now you can help restore it with new Nivea Visage Q10 Wrinkle Control. It's guaranteed to reduce the look of wrinkles like never before.
Smile, you got French's. Smile, you got French's. Smile, you got fun. Smile, you got fun.
You'll really smile over French's latest great taste. Sweet, delicious French's Honey Mustard.
Smile, you've got French's.
Baby Depot's Memorial Day sale is on now at Burlington Coat Factory. Take an extra $15 to $75 off all Childcraft baby furniture. Save $5 to $10 on this Carter's Travel Play Yard, car seat, stroller, bassinet, and bounce and play seat. Save up to 40% off famous designer diaper bags. And take an extra 10 to 30% off all coordinated baby bedding and accessories. Only at Baby Depot sale. We're more than great coats.
My mama told me you better shop around.
Fidelity.com. Every second counts. Instant broker availability and response time may be subject to market conditions.
Telling your kids about the birds and the bees is only half the job. You've also got to talk about HIV. That's not just the best way to fight AIDS, it's the only way.
Polls show she is one of the most admired women in America. But even after 7 years in the spotlight, she remains a riddle for many people. It's hard to know what keeps her going through marital problems made public, political fights turned ugly, through triumphs, disasters, and always the demands of her work. Tonight we get some answers about how she does it from the only person in the world who really knows.
You know, I've been really blessed. I mean, I know people might look at this and think, oh my gosh, you know, with what she's been through, how can she say that? But
hard to see how you've been blessed the last year and a half or so.
But you know, nobody would wish on anyone what we and the country have gone through the last year and a half or so. But I also have learned a lot, and I have been able to share experiences with people that have been extraordinary with their outreach to me, their prayers, their good wishes, their concerns.
Well, some people...
7 years ago, on 60 Minutes, she seemed to ridicule the idea of staying with a straying husband.
You know, I'm not sitting here as some little woman standing by my man like Tammy Wynette. I'm sitting here because I love him, and I respect him, and I honor what he's been through and what we've been through together. And you know, if that's not enough for people, then heck, don't vote for him.
Today, she doesn't talk about fidelity. She talks about forgiveness and dealing with personal pain.
Sometimes things come totally out of the blue and something good or terrible happens to you, neither one of which you could have predicted and probably certainly don't deserve. Life is not by any means fair or easy for anyone. But part of what I think we're challenged to do is to keep trying, and to keep trying not only on our own behalf, but on behalf of anyone whom we can touch and whom we can help.
You mentioned you're a religious person. Did you find yourself praying more over the most difficult period?
Well, I've prayed a lot ever since we've been in the White House. It's been a circumstance that certainly requires a lot of prayer. And a lot of people
smile, but I sense you're serious about it.
Well, I am very serious about it. I have prayed a lot, and I have been prayed for a lot, and I have been grateful for the prayers of people I know and people I will probably never meet. And it has helped me enormously. And you know, sometimes it's a way not only of pouring your heart out, but of really getting filled up again with, you know, some energy and some hopefulness and positive feelings that can carry you forward.
She has always been more comfortable explaining health care.
On the benefits package, we have priced that out very carefully, Congressman.
More effective fighting off financial questions.
We went into Whitewater to make money, not to lose it.
More at ease on national television, blaming partisan politics for her husband's problems.
This vast right-wing conspiracy that has been conspiring against my husband since the day he announced for president.
Hillary Rodham Clinton's latest incarnation is probably the one she likes least. Long-suffering wife, for some, an object of sympathy. But now the woman who has always been at his side and on his side may be about to step out on her own. And as she flirts with a run for the Senate, she is once again on the brink of breaking new ground for American First Ladies. Soon, she could be campaigning for herself. But the agenda she lays out seems downright old-fashioned. She sees her work as focusing on children and families and the unique problems they face today.
In some ways, I think we've been running kind of an experiment, if you will, in raising of children. It's not anything anybody planned. It's been unwitting. But we've been changing the way we live, and we've been tearing down a lot of our institutions. We've been undermining a lot of old values. We've allowed all kinds of influences in our front doors that we never would have before to influence the lives of our children. We've worked in ways, and our families are structured differently than was ever done before. So there's just been many, many things that have changed within 1 or 2 generations, which we really have to pay attention to, and we really have to start taking some action on behalf of our kids.
Give me a specific 1 or 2 things, something concrete you think we could do and should be doing.
We have to be better connected to each other, and particularly to our children. We have to do more to build a sense of community. Now, what does that mean? Well, it may mean that our high schools and our schools are too large for children to really feel connected to the adults who are there, for the adults to know them. You know, I was recently in a school in Queens in New York City, and I was just stunned that in a school built for 1,500 kids, there were 2,000 kids, and that there were going to be 500 more because of overcrowding. You know, that sends a real message to children that you're not our first priority. We're not going to make space for you. I go to so many towns and see now schools that have no play areas, where kids have no safe places where they can gather. It's very different from the way most of us grew up. It is just a lot harder to be a child today. You know, if we were doing something in the front yard of our house when my mother wasn't home and the woman across the street saw us, she'd be out in a minute to tell us to, you know, stop doing that, or she'd tell our mother. We could walk down sidewalks, we could ride our bikes to the parks. There were so many other ways that we were connected. The church was a big part of our life. You know, my father was home for dinner every night at the same time. We have changed so much about how we live that I don't think it's useful at all to point fingers and place blame. It's much more a question of how each of us will take responsibility in our own lives and in our professional and public lives, you know, to begin to speak out and make the changes that we need.
You mentioned again children. It's been, you know, it's been your burning passion to what you've been connected most of your career. Did or did not the president, your husband, last year, did he communicate mixed messages to young people about right and wrong?
Well, you know, again, I'm not going to go back and, you know, talk about that in any public way at this time. I think he has himself spoken about the people he let down and the disappointment he caused. So I will let him speak to that. But I think no matter who you are, or no matter what you do or what's done to you, there's always the chance to try to make it better. That there's always the hope for forgiveness, to forgive and be forgiven. And that comes certainly out of my religious faith, but it also comes out of my personal experience.
You believe in redemption?
Absolutely. I've seen too much of it. I've not only seen it in the lives of other people, I've seen it in my own and those I love around me. So I do.
Let's pretend for a moment. It's 2050. There's an encyclopedia, and it has a picture of Hillary Rodham Clinton, one-time First Lady of the United States. What do you think the caption under that picture will be?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
What would you like it to be?
Oh, my goodness. You know, I don't think about myself in those terms. I really do try to get up every day and just do the best I can. I know that may sound sort of simple, but that's how I live my life. And I think I've been a sort of transition figure in the minds of a lot of Americans because of, the age at which we came into office, the backgrounds we brought, the things we worked on, my concerns, which I tried to continue to advocate. So I think that I've been a transition figure, and I don't know what the final judgment on any of that will be.
We've talked about the possibility you're running for the Senate. You've said that you're obviously interested in it. What are the possibilities that one day, someday, you'll run for president?
Oh my gosh, that's not possible, I don't believe.
You've thought about it, though, haven't you?
No, I haven't.
Never considered it?
People have said that to me, but it's something I don't take seriously at all. It's not even in the universe of my thinking.
like it or not, I know you like it not, your husband is one of 2 presidents to have been impeached. Do you agree or disagree it's going to be in the first paragraph of his obituary?
Well, I don't know. I suppose it depends on who writes the obituary. I don't think that it is by any means the most important contribution of his presidency, which I consider to be filled with very significant progress for our country.
He told me that he, in an interview, that he did not consider it a badge of shame. Do you?
It was such a political process. It was a tragically political misfortune for our country. And I think that when the history is written, it'll be seen in a broader context and will be more understood.
You've talked about that before, but you now have a chance to reflect on a little. Of all the allegations, accusations, charges made, what do you consider to be the most unfair attack?
Well, you know, I think that the entire process was an unfortunate one, and I'm just glad it's behind us now. I'm glad that we survived that painful period, and it was painful. It was painful, obviously, for me and for my family and for our country.
It is the most she will share about the past year and a half. And for some in our confessional society, that may not be enough. But Hillary Clinton doesn't care. She's intent on sharing something else. Not what she's gone through, but what she's come away with.
You know, when you go through any kind of difficult experience, you have a choice. I mean, you can let it break you and embitter you, or you can take whatever you've experienced, whatever pain or suffering, and decide that you're still going to have faith, you know, your faith in God, your faith in your fellow man, that you're still going to believe that you can make a contribution to a better life. It's a choice. Every single day we wake up, you can choose to be cynical or hopeful. You can choose to be grateful or contemptuous. You can make all those choices. And for me, it's not a very hard choice.